Hello everybody, welcome. My name is PenguinDog, and today we're going to be reviewing a game called Mirror's Edge. Let's go. Okay, so Mirror's Edge is a game developed by DICE in 2009, and yeah, it's a first-person platformer, which I understand a lot of people have a lot of negative connotations about, but this was the game which really pioneered the genre. I mean, I don't think we would have, games like Dying Light today without Mirror's Edge, so it's very interesting to just go back to these older games and just look at how innovative they really were. So I guess we better start at the graphics, eh? So they actually look pretty good, and I was quite surprised by this, considering that it came out in 2009, obviously, so it's quite an old game, 11 years old, 10, 11 years old, but yeah, it looks alright, to be honest. I mean, the skyboxes are obviously going to be a little more outdated compared to today's standards, but they're not too bad. You know, you won't notice them half the time. And I would say the other issue I have with the graphics is that things look a little too pristine, a little too white at times. But again, you could argue that that ties into the story and the narrative of the game, in which, fair play, you know. So I guess it kind of gets a pass on that one, but yeah, graphics are pretty good. Now, for the gameplay itself, it's actually pretty good. So the idea is that you are this runner in a dystopian future, not that far off from today. It's sort of, think cyberpunk, but I think more grounded and more modern. So you're running across rooftops to avoid surveillance and deliver sensitive pieces of information around to different people. And so that involves a lot of jumping from rooftops to rooftops and a lot of parkour. And the actual parkour itself is great. I actually really enjoy the parkour in this game. I would actually venture to say it's a little better than Dying Light. I still think this is the best first-person platformer ever released. It does have some bugs and issues. For example, when you run towards a pipe, sometimes you clip through it. I'm going to have to filter through some footage I recorded, see if I can find some good examples of that, but sometimes it can mess up, but for the most part, like 99% of the time, it's actually pretty good, and often very fast-paced too. The adrenaline pump you get from playing this game is immense with the blasting music, and we'll get onto the soundtrack and the music later on, but the blasting music and the oftentimes really intense gunshots like flying past your ears as you're like trying to run to the elevator door. You're like it's actually really good, and is by far the best part of the game. When you're not running for your life, there's these sort of like more chilled out sections where you try and like path and try and like think one step ahead of how you're going to get from point A to B, and it plays out like a puzzle game. You know, you're looking around for different elements. You think, oh, maybe I can run on that side of the wall to get up there, and it sort of engineers your brain to think like a parkourist, essentially. Like, there is the runner vision, which is when you run towards an object, or if there's an object which isn't so obvious, it'll go red. And that basically means you should use that as like a parkour element. So this will usually be on like ramps, or they'll be like on different pipes, or maybe they'll be like on a wall just to like illustrate, yeah, this is where you're supposed to be going. I assume they did that because of playtesting reasons where it wasn't so obvious, but it's a little bit of a cheap solution. They could have designed the levels, they could have designed the game in a way where things are more obvious than they actually are. And I think the biggest example of this is the elevators. The elevator is never clear whether you can actually go inside of them or not. So if you are playing a game where obviously it's just one big corridor and there's an elevator at the end of the level, you can think, okay, that elevator is going to be openable. But there's just a lot of times where like you're going to fight in like this arena style, and I will get onto the fighting later, but you're in like an arena and there's some elevator doors and you're like running around trying to find out how to get to the top, and you realize that there's an elevator you're supposed to go into, but it wasn't made clear. So the runner vision, it doesn't completely fix the game, and oftentimes the things which actually need runner vision don't have runner vision. I feel like if they did it in a way where the game rules are more clear as to what is and what isn't, then this issue would be completely avoidable, but also it just sort of spoils the puzzle elements of the game. Not to say that that doesn't still exist, and it really does. A lot of the times I'm running around in an area trying to find how to get to point B, but again, the runner vision does kind of spoil it. You can turn it off in the options, but then the reason it's there is because they don't make things obvious as to where to go a lot of the times. But the actual parkouring elements are great, if not sometimes held down by the gunplay. Now, there is shooting in this game, which is unfortunate, actually. Every single NPC in the game which has guns, you can actually go up to and snatch it off them. It's sort of like a quick time event. But I don't really mind that too much. I think the issue with the guns is that it slows you down tremendously when you use them, which is a problem for a game about speed and momentum. You know, to go into these area designed places and just like snatch a gun and shoot everyone, it feels a little bit lame. There's a pretty convincing argument made by people to say, well, hey, if you don't like the guns, you don't have to do it, you can still sprint past them. But it leads to this issue where, because the game isn't really too clear where to go, sometimes you're just running into a room and dying over and over and over and over again because you're trying to find a way out. And the only way to do that and to find that way out is to engage in the gunplay, which I do feel like is deliberate, and it does kind of suck because the gunplay really brings down the flow and momentum of the game. But the actual guns themselves aren't too bad. The hit detection seems to be fine from what I've played. Unfortunately, the variety of guns is quite disappointing. There's only a sniper rifle, an assault rifle, a submachine gun, and a pistol, which is a little disappointing. But obviously, the game shouldn't really be too focused on the guns anyway, and the fact that they try and slow you down and really force you to use the guns, especially on a first playthrough, you will need to be using the guns. It is a little bit of a shame. Another issue I find with the game are the indoor areas. So there are indoor areas in the game, so it's not all just running from rooftop to rooftop to rooftop, and these are probably the worst part, simply because of how linear they are and how confined they are. I mean, first-person platforming only really works if you've got a wide view, because the reason first-person platformers usually fail is because it's quite nauseating. So the fact that it's set in like an outdoor play park really makes the game accessible to those who might have nausea issues, and indoors you really can't tell what's going on all of the time, and the gameplay really just ends up devolving around to, oh well, what's the way you're supposed to go, what's the way the developer intended you to go, as opposed to the more freeing parts of the game, which are the outdoor elements. Now, I'm not saying that the outdoor elements aren't like that, but a lot of the time there's a little more variety into how you can approach things, whereas indoor, it's just, you know, trying to figure out what way the developer intended you to play. It's not as fun. It's also not a big deal. It's still a great amount of fun, but I feel like the outdoor sections are a little greater. So before we move on from the gameplay, just the guns. I feel like if they didn't slow down the character, and if you could actually run and gun with these guns, like just imagine running on a wall, turning to the right of you, shooting down a few enemies, and then jumping off into another building and doing a roll, and then shooting someone as you go. That would be so fun. You know, just imagine how Titanfall 2 did it. That would have been great in a game like Mirror's Edge. But the fact that they have to slow you down with the weapons, I don't know whose decision it was, and I haven't played the sequel, but I really hope they fix that, because it is a big issue with this game, and it is one which is noticeable enough for you to get annoyed by it. Next thing is the soundtrack and the music. Now, the soundtrack is by Solar Fields, which I'd never heard before, but he did a phenomenal job on this soundtrack. It is absolutely phenomenal. I literally have no faults with it at all. In the soundtrack, there's a lot of songs which are more peaceful and mellow, which is a surprising choice for a game like Mirror's Edge, but it totally works. Just the somberness of the buildings as you're looking down from a skyscraper, and these really like plucky synths are playing, it's really nice, and it really adds a whole lot to the game. And every time I come back to Mirror's Edge, I always remember the soundtrack. Just the title I'm gonna play, actually I'm gonna play the title music now so you guys can hear, and I'm also gonna play some other songs maybe, and just listen to how great the music is in this game. So yeah, as I say, absolutely brilliant. Not really any flaws there. And finally, let's talk about the story or the narrative of the game, which is a little crap, to be honest. It's forgettable. I didn't remember a thing about it when I came back to it, and I only just replayed it last year. So, yeah, it's not great. There's just a lot of missed potential. They could have really done some world building with the cyberpunk setting. It was just really basic revenge story with a few twists and turns in there. I don't really like to spoil much of my reviews, but just take it from me, like, the story is a little pathetic at times, and you're gonna be ignoring it 90% of the time when you're running from roof to roof. So, but yeah, all those things combined, I'm going to give Mirror's Edge a 7 out of 10. It has some great parkour, which was super innovative at the time. The graphics still hold up today, which is really says a lot about how good they must have been back in the day. If only the gunplay was better, if only the indoor areas were a little more open, then it really could have been excellent, a masterpiece. But, you know, the graphics, the soundtrack, the actual main gameplay loops are all brilliant. I recommend it entirely as long as you're ready to accept some flaws. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching the video. If you liked this review, please leave a like. Please subscribe, because I'm going to be doing these every Sunday. And hey, let me know what you thought of Mirror's Edge down in the comments below. And I will see you, hopefully, next Sunday. So, see you in the next review. Goodbye for now.